welcome to another engaging episode of Surprise Cast. In this special installment, I sit down with the very talented Andrew Rose, a musician and master engineer, to delve into his fascinating life and career. Broadcasting from a picturesque village in southwest France, Andrew brings a unique blend of stories and insights from his diverse experiences. Listeners will be captivated by his anecdotes about his childhood, early musical inspirations, and late-night BBC radio shows' initial forays into songwriting. He shares deeply touching stories about his supportive parents, his musical endeavors with a childhood neighbor, and the pivotal moments that helped shape his career. Enjoy my conversation with Mr. Rose. Hello, my friend Andrew Rose. Thank you for participating in the Surprise Cast room. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for asking. It's a lovely, lovely, special treat to connect with you, as I've been talking with you online for a bit, and it's nice to see you in person.
It's good to see you too.
Could you tell the listeners where you are patched in from?
Right. I'm in a little village in southwest France, about an hour from Bordeaux, which is why I'm drinking some of our great local wine this evening. We live in a little village in France for the last 20 years.
It sounds very picturesque. Where were you living before?
I worked for a while at the BBC and lived in London until about the turn of the century. Then we moved out into a village near Canterbury in Kent in the southeast of England, and we moved here 2004.
I'm looking forward to taking a deeper dive into what you just said in some fashion. So let's begin our conversation. Andrew, this conversation is going to be built around the notion of the art and science of getting happier. Build the life you want. This was written by two people, Arthur C. Brooks and a woman by the name of Oprah Winfrey. So inside this book are 4 pillars to happiness, but we're going to focus on 3: family, friendship, collaboration, and your work as a musician. We're going to start off with family, and I want to read something to you regarding that. And this is something where it's based on a Charlie Brown comic strip, where Charlie Brown is on the wall, the philosophical wall, and he's with his friend Frida. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to ask you a little question. Here we go. Frida says to Charlie Brown, "Do you ever worry about growing up, Charlie Brown?" Charlie Brown says, "All the time, Frida." She says, "I do too. I worry about my being able to fit into the responsibilities of adult life and womanhood. Of course, I do have one big advantage." Charlie Brown says, "What's that?" Frida says, "I have naturally curly hair." Charlie Brown says, "Oh, good grief. So here's my question, Andrew. What was your childhood like while growing up?"
It's a very good question. Where does one begin? I grew up in a small town in the British Midlands near Birmingham in England with a younger brother. My dad was a school teacher. My mother was a social worker. My mum was very musical, and that meant that there was music in the house. My dad loved music. We had a piano, which I learned to play. I had parents who let me follow what I wanted to do. And my dad was a physics teacher, but they kind of recognized that I wanted to do something more musical. And although I was pretty good at science and math and stuff like that, they didn't object to me going on and studying music at university. So I was lucky to have that support from them. In my kind of mid-teens, I started listening to late night radio on the BBC, a guy called John Peel, who a lot of people will have heard of, who would play all kinds of stuff that you would not hear anywhere else. It's where I first heard Cocteau Twins, first heard Chameleons, Jesus and Mary Chain, all these bands from the 80s, but kind of opened a window on a whole different world of music that absolutely turned me on and kind of made me want to do music myself. And so I began. I had actually, so going back to when I was about 12, there was a neighbor of mine who wanted to be a pop star. I mean, like a pop star. And he decided that because I played the piano, we could form a pop group. He would write the words and he'd bring them around to me and stick them on the piano and then force me to write a tune that was, in his words, catchy. And which was not a bad discipline, really. It kind of led me into writing music. We moved away. We weren't neighbors for very long, and we moved away from him. I kind of ended up having to write my own words, which were equally corny. But music was kind of a thing that was in my life from about the age of 12 or 13 onwards, in a big way, in a kind of creative way, as well as a listening way. Didn't get to a lot of gigs. We weren't anywhere near anywhere I could easily get to as a teenager to see gigs. But, you know, it was there, and I had the time to spend just banging away on that piano and learning how to put music together.
So I spoke with Andy Trumpet a couple of days ago from the band James, and we had talked about his discovery and love for the trumpet and what that meant to him. So I'm going to ask you a very similar question as I asked Andy. What is it about the piano that resonates with you? Why does it speak to your heart?
I think the beauty of the piano is, and this probably what leads to why I've ended up being very much these days a solo musician, is you can do everything. You can be everything with the piano. You can play the bass, you can play the whole range, and you can fill out quite a big sound. When you're a kid and there's, you know, limited opportunities to do so, and we didn't have money to buy synthesizers or guitars or stuff, it was an instrument I could make a big noise on. And it was what I learned. You know, I was started with piano lessons when I was 5, so it was what I could actually play. More recently, I've kind of moved away and playing and deliberately playing a lot more guitar because I don't have the same facility. I can sit down and play. I've always played piano by ear, and it seems to come naturally. And it's piano and keyboards, it just fit under my fingers. It's hard to explain, really, but I can hear. Since I was a kid, I remember at school when I was like 9 or 10, Blondie would have a hit out, and other kids would say, "Come on, Andrew, see if you can play, you know, Sunday Girl." I thought, "Well, yeah, no problem, easy. I'll bang it out." Having never seen the sheet music, but I could work it out, and it's just a natural kind of gift, I guess. And it's just something that stayed with me. And there was a brief time when I was kind of 11 or 12 when I stopped having lessons and decided to give it all up. And then I went back to it because I loved it so much.
Okay, so let's stay in the childhood years a little bit longer.
Okay.
I want to know, did you have any struggles while growing up? Maybe that was in school, maybe that was in friendships, maybe connecting to your parents. Did you have any hardships? And if you did, do any of those hardships manifest themselves today as an adult?
Okay. Let me kind of stay with the time back then to start with. My hormones took off when I was about 14 or 15. When I was a teenager and going through all the kind of hormonal things that a teenager goes through, I seem to fall in love with a different girl every couple of weeks at school. And that all kind of manifested itself in my music, which was kind of like a teenage diary, really. And I kind of it gave me something to write songs about, I suppose. But it gave me a reason to write songs in the first place. And the lyrics would, because I'd done these songs with my mate who used to bring the lyrics around, I always started with the lyrics. I always wrote a set of lyrics down, stuck them in front of me, in front of the piano, and worked out the song from there. But in retrospect, looking back, it was a way that I kind of dealt with growing up. It was a way to see my way through that, navigate through the joys and ups and downs of being a teenager and a young man. What was interesting was that when I finally did meet the woman who became my wife and who is still my wife all these years later, when I was 23, suddenly the songs dried up. I didn't have anything to write about because the angst that I was dealing with through music was no longer there. And just realized I wasn't very good at writing songs saying, oh, how jolly happy I am in love. It was much easier to be depressed and miserable and write songs like that, coming out of the 80s and listening to the Smiths and all that kind of stuff. It was much easier to do that than it was to write jolly love songs. And then your life my life took a different course at that point. Moving to today, and this has been again interesting. When I started, I kind of didn't write any music for a long time, and I didn't go to gigs for a long time. And then Slow Dive reformed 10 years ago, and I couldn't not go and reconnect with them. I'd met them back in the 90s and seen them quite a few times back then. And I'd kind of been in touch with Rachel Goswell in the sort of early 2000s, but I had to go back and see them. And I heard this sound in Paris, and I thought, oh my God, I want to know how to make something that sounds like that. So that kind of got me started again slowly. I got a guitar from Nick Noble of 93 Million Miles from the Sun.
Uh-huh.
And then I didn't have an amp, so I contacted Christian from Slow Dive, said, can you sell me, have you got a spare amp I can buy off you? And he said, yeah, sure, there's this amp that I used for the reunion gig, but then we made some money so I could buy a proper amp. I thought, oh, that sounds good. So I took, and I kind of started playing, and in about 2017, I tried to put something together. It wasn't really working. But I have a studio here, see behind me, actually a mastering studio. I do a lot of mastering that I've been doing now, remastering and restoring old recordings that I've been doing for the last 20 years as a business. So I've got the gear and set up, and I finally set up this little area behind me for recording during COVID. And I thought, well, yeah, this is now the time to actually have a go at this and plug it all in and see if I can learn how it works. So I recorded an album I took some time off over the Christmas and New Year 21, 22, started playing around with stuff. I was listening to the Telescopes a bit at the time, and I was trying to think about how he was getting that guitar sound that's kind of that burning but really quiet stuff. And I was playing around with stuff like that.
Well, with all that creativity flowing, did you ever write anything and put something together?
And the first album is really me kind of trying to figure out how it all works. There's a song that's just instrumental and it's just guitar with a kind of piano loop. And then there's another one where I bring a drum machine in, and then I'm kind of thinking, how else can and gradually I'm finding my way around the gear and the software and whatever. And I'm using a guitar because it pushes me into doing things that I'm not really comfortable with. If I was on a piano, it kind of forces a degree of creativity there because I can't really play it very well. But I kind of came unstuck with lyrics, and it's this same thing. It's like, what am I going to write about?
Yeah.
So I think I think, well, I can't put out an album totally of instrumentals. I had a song that I'd written in the mid 80s that I resurrected. I had an epiphany. I was taking my son to Barcelona to a football match. And I was lying in the bar one morning thinking, what am I going to write about? If you can't, at my age, write a song about taking your 20-year-old son to Spain to watch a soccer match, what can you write about? And I came down, I thought, and I started writing. It's like, boom. Oh God, I remember how to do this.
Is this
I know how
gold?
to make the lines scan because I've got a subject. Yeah, I can do it. And I wrote this song. It took me 5 minutes. I sang it in one take, and that was the opening track on the first album. But I was still kind of stuck with lyrics, so I got in touch with a couple of people, a couple of friends. Jackie Casbo. I sent her a song that was purely an instrumental track. I kind of thought it sounded a bit like Tombstones in Their Eyes, so it was called Tombstones. And she wrote a brilliant set of lyrics to it. She messaged me back. She said, "Wow, I heard this and immediately, and I had to write it down straight away." And it is a fantastic bit of songwriting which I could never have done. She weaves the vocal lines in and out of each other and adds bits here and whatever, and it's all kind of. I'd never seen anything like it. When I was writing songs, it was like one line because you had one piece of tape and you started at the beginning, got to the end. This was kind of chopped up, and I thought, well, that's an interesting.
When you get a chance to speak with Andrew, you get this feeling that he's sharing nothing but the hard, cold facts with you, but he does it in a way that is warm, it's inviting. His storytelling is masterful. The way that he's able to hold on to each syllable and provide great specific details.
Would you be able to write or can we use one of your poems? He sent her a sheet of poetry, and hence we had lyrics for another song. But I'm still at this point where I'm not really sure what to write about. This time round, we come to something which I've got something to write about, which is something that's difficult to talk about. But I started the album just middle of last November, and I was thinking about Slowdive and the stuff that they were doing, and one or two other bands. And I knocked out the first song, and it was really quite different. And then I had and I'm thinking, yeah, this is the way this album's going to go. And then something happened to me which totally changed the direction, and it gave me something to write about, both in terms of instrumentals and in terms of songs. I had a medical misdiagnosis. I'll say that right away now, but I didn't know it was a misdiagnosis. So at the beginning of December, I was staring into an abyss, and for 2 months didn't know where I might be in 12 months' time. And that kind of completely blew me to pieces. And it's that which gave me something, that kind of angst to write about. That's what the song Fade is about. That one I wrote just kind of the end of December, and it took me 3 or 4 days to sing it because it was just so painful to me at the time. But I have developed and had developed as a kid that the ability to pour emotions into songs like that. And that it kind of got me through that period. It was happily for me, and unexpectedly, I had further tests at the end of January, which confirmed that the initial diagnosis was made in error, and I'm fine. And I don't want to talk to you about what it was that was diagnosed. It's not something I've talked to many people about, but it was kind of terminal and going out in a not very nice kind of way, which was what I don't want to fade away, which is what I look very much like I would be doing.
Okay. Thank you for being vulnerable. I will not probe regarding what the specifics are. However, I would like this on hold and come back to it because I think there's some good mining here.
Yep, absolutely.
Based on what you said regarding Barcelona album and collaboration, this moves the needle into the next part of our conversation. And this is about ship and collaboration. This is the pillars of according to Arthur C. Brooks and his work with Oprah and Winfrey, the art and science of being a happier person. So I'm going to read something to you, Andrew, and I want you to think how this connects to your friendships within the music industry and collaborating with people. Here we go. Again, this is from the book, Build the Life You Want. He says, make a list of the first 10 of your friends who pop into your head. Some you would text with any silly thought. Others you call only a couple times a year. Some are people you look up to, others you like, but do not especially admire. You fit into these categories for others as well. Maybe you are helpful to one person and confident to another. You get different things out of different relationships, which is all well and good. There is one type of friend almost everyone has, the friend whom you need or want something. You don't necessarily use this person. The benefit might be mutual, but the friendship's core benefit is more than camaraderie. He or she is useful. So here's my question for you, Andrew. You mentioned earlier about some collaborations that you have done in the past. If you'd like to speak more about that, that would be great, regarding the utility, the usefulness of these friends and how they played a role in the development in your craft as a musician.
Okay, I'll start with Jackie Casbone, because we were just kind of chatting as you do with Facebook friends. Can't remember where it all began, really. At about the time that I started to sort of futz about and try and make recordings of my own, having done work with quite a lot of musicians as a mastering engineer. And so I was sending her these little snippets that I was recording, and she was coming back with, wow, that's great. I love it. Oh, that's perfect. That's just the day that I'm seeing the snow outside, or whatever it was that she said. And that she was so effusive in her praise, and it kind of made me think, well, maybe this might be all right. Then maybe maybe I should carry on doing this. And I think that was a really good bit of gentle support when I was just first starting out again, so to speak. I say starting again. I did so many recordings back in the 80s, but to start again. And so she was a natural person to turn to when I was looking for somebody who would maybe be able to come up with something lyric wise. I think might have been Richard Goering at DKFM who got us in touch with each other. But we ended up, she provided that wonderful song. Well, I say song, yeah. She made that song what it is with her fantastic lyrics and vocals. And then I did something. She sent me something that she wanted me to play a bit of guitar on for a song that she was doing, and we did various other bits together. And that was just really kind of helped get me started recording and exploring. And this is it's a fantastic thing when you recorded something, and I spent quite a lot of time thinking, well, what would a tune sound like over this guitar music? What would I do? What's the lyrics? What's going on here? And then you send it away and something totally, totally different comes back that you couldn't ever imagine. You think there's the creativity there is just astounding. And you think, well, yeah, having been essentially a solo musician all my life as a pianist and, a singer, songwriter or whatever I was back in the 80s, that was amazing. The other person who I would talk about would be Mary Wire. I first saw a band called Even As We Speak, who were on Sarah Records, Australian band, back in 1993. And they were supporting a band called Heavenly, who are really, who are now back together and playing gigs together. Anyway, Even As We Speak were excellent that day. And I went back 3 weeks later, saw them. This is the height of summer 1993 at a little pub in North London. And I reckon every Australian under the age of 25 in London was packed into that place. It was just one of the best gigs ever. It was the whole thing was brilliant. And I kept in touch with them. And when we moved over to France, I was working for a guy in Glasgow. Egg Records was reissuing a lot of these things. And he asked me if I would do a compilation of Even As We Speak stuff. So I ended up working through him with the people in the band, particularly Mary. So we reconnected. It was about 2005-06. And then they reformed in 2018. And they came over, did a mini tour of England, which coincided with my family holiday with my son and my wife in Spain. And they were playing 6 nights and we were away for a fortnight. And I said to my wife, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to fly back to England for a couple of nights. Yeah, okay, she said. I'll fly my friend Siobhan out to join me for a couple of nights. So that kind of was okay. And we had a great little time down in Brighton and hooked up and kept that conversation going. So when it came to to be honest with you, I have favorite singers for each decade, and Mary is my favorite female singer of the 90s. Her voice on those Sarah Records albums just absolutely divine, and the chance to work with her was unbelievable. And she said she would be happy to work on a song together. That was amazing. At the same time, I was kind of giving back because they had found some very old recordings in a box in her mother's attic that they assumed had been lost since the mid 80s, I think.
Yeah.
So we remastered their very first single, which was put out as a 7-inch single. And such is the nature of bizarre vinyl sales now, got into the UK top 10 for vinyl singles alongside, ABBA and David Bowie and Led Zeppelin. There's Even As We Speak, number 6 in the charts, albeit an obscure chart for 7-inch vinyl. So, we're working together. And then last year we did another song together. I was saying we just chat a lot and we kind of connect really well.
Well, based on that incredible friendship, did you actually end up covering anything?
And I said, well, I'd really like to do a cover version. She said, well, you should do a cover, I said, well, I've been going through the records and maybe I could do one of yours. She said, yeah, you should. So I ended up picking my favorite song off their albums, which I hadn't really listened to the lyrics too close, I hadn't really analyzed the lyrics. And I didn't really know the history of the band so well. But it was written by Matt Love, who is guitarist and co-singer. And it's about him splitting up with Mary in 1993. I hadn't really kind of thought about it. And I don't think she did when she said, yeah, let's do that together. And let's, and we kind of ended up as a duet, with me taking one line, her taking another line, and it came out really well. And then we got together last summer in England. They were over again, and I had to go over, obviously. And I said, well, I'd like to do a video for this. And she suddenly kind of started thinking about the implications of singing this song with me about her breakup with Matt. And so we kind of just a video of us walking along the beach and along the pier and stuff. But it was great to sort of make that connection.
Yes.
Having talked to her at a gig back in 1993, having revered as a singer for 30 years, and to find myself doing 2 songs together and doing a video together, and being able to offer something back, being able to say, look, I can do this with your music, and I'm an expert in getting best sound out of some rather old and difficult recordings, because that's what I do all the time.
Well, so Thank you for sharing these amazing friendship stories and collaborations. And I want to take it one step further before we move into the third part of our conversation, which will be the actual work, if you will. So I've been meaning to ask you, Andrew, actually just chatting with you in the message box on Facebook. You have done some amazing interviews with Robin Guthrie, Pete Fidge from Adorable, so on and so forth. I imagine you have established solid friendships with these people, a trust, a bond, if you will. So what is it about your personality that you're able to do these interviews with some pretty high profile people where they feel like, yes, I'm willing to give Andrew my time and my words. You're doing something right within these friendships. So let's give yourself a pat on the back at this moment. And what are your attributes as a friend that people gravitate towards?
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Yes, it is.
Sometimes it's fun to really throw a zinger at my interviewee. Andrew handles this question beautifully.
And I talked about Robin Guthrie, and he said, yes, well, I want, two OGs. And I had to look up what an OG was, because it's not something that, anyway. But I guess, I've been around a long time in different parts of the music business. I interviewed bands back in the early 90s for BBC Radio, but I'm also a musician. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see it from both sides. I used to have my rejection letter from 4AD Records that I got in 1985, 86, pinned to my wall at home when I was a kid. So I think there's a kind of trust there that I assume so, that I not only got the track record and have been around for quite a long time, listening to all of this stuff, and also kind of grew up. I mean, Pete Fidge is about my age. Robin Guthrie he thought we were the same age, to be honest with you, but he's a little bit older than me. And I just done an interview with Oliver Ackerman of A Place to Bury Strangers. He's a bit younger than me. There's a nice story behind how we got to know each other. They were playing in Bordeaux when my son was 15, and I got 2 tickets for it. And then I kind of thought, oh gosh, this is really throwing a 15-year-old in at the deep end for his first ever gig.
Yes.
But I managed to track down the manager and said, look, is the band going to be a problem if we kind of come along to the sound check? And I introduced my son to the members of the band, because otherwise this could go horribly wrong. Yeah. And so we went back, this is 8 years ago, we went to sound check, and that's how I got to know Oliver. And every time he comes over here, I go along to the sound check. He's always sitting on the floor, gluing yesterday's guitar back together and restringing one for tonight and whatever. And I would bring along a few bottles of wine, and we have a bit of a chat. So we've just kind of got to know each other. And he knows that I've started, I was mastering back then, and I've started doing my own stuff as well. And so we kind of talk, we can communicate on different levels of recording and gear and that kind of stuff, as well as having a more long-term relationship based on just, I needed to do this because my son was about to seriously, the loudest gig I've ever been to was that night, that first night. I remember turning to my son, Jack, at about midnight. They'd nearly finished, and he was just standing at the back as white as a sheet. Now I'm thinking, oh dear. I said, we should go now. I said, I think so. And we walked out, and 2 minutes later, he was on such a high. And I thought, yes, we've done it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Andrew, there's obviously something very trustworthy in your personality. You seem very loyal. You're obviously knowledgeable about music and your experience. So you bring all that together in a friendship, and good things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm a pretty straightforward kind of person. I don't sort of mess around. I don't like to mess people around. I like to be reliable for people. I like to, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it.
Yeah.
And I hope that kind of people notice that, I'm on time as well. I used to work at the BBC, and the first thing they said to you when you started is, as a sound engineer, they said, and that actually, sorry, I'll interrupt myself there. BBC sound engineer, that gets you a lot of respect with a lot of people, because there's not many people that ever did that job. And you kind of get the respect that you know what you're talking about and you know what you're doing, because you've had that 14 years at the very highest level in BBC radio, and particularly British musicians know what that's a kind of, that opens a few doors that might otherwise be closed, I think. I've forgotten where I was at now.
Well, I think again that harkens back to how people perceive you as someone that.
Yeah. I mean,
you've got a great resume here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But as I say, if you're doing that particular job, you can't afford to muck people about. You've got to be there. You've got to get it right first time. You've got to be on time. If you're doing the 6 p.m. news, nationwide news, it goes out at 6 p.m. If you're 2 minutes late, you're out of a job, and the whole thing's collapsed. You've got to be able to get things right when they start to go wrong when you're live on air. There was a particular day that there's a violinist, Nigel Kennedy, possibly one of the most famous English classical musicians of the late 20th century, came in to do a broadcast, and he thought it was a pre-record, and he turns up 30 minutes before we're due to go live on air, and he brings this sort of $5 million Stradivarius violin, and I said, Nigel, sit down there, quick, and you've got to get it right, and you're on air, and that's it. And you've got to have that kind of ability to get on with it and not kind of get it.
Fabulous. That was part 2 of our conversation. We're going to move into the final part. We're going to get deeper into your work for Kelly, and I want to talk about new album, and we're going to listen to a few songs. Before we do all that, I'm going to read to you a passage from The Creative Act, A Way of Being, written by Rick Rubin. Here we go. Rick titles this chapter, Surrounding the Lightning Bolt. An explosion of information arrives in inspired moments. How can we avoid becoming fixated on these bolts of lightning? Some artists live as storm chasers, awaiting spontaneous strikes, longing for the thrill. A more constructive strategy is to focus less on the lightning bolt and more on the spaces surrounding it. The space before, because lightning does not strike unless the right preconditions are met. And the space after, because the electricity dissipates if you do not capture it and use it. I'd like for you to respond to that however you like.
I'm going to respond to that with something that Robin Guthrie said to me, and which totally mirrored my own experience. I was asking him about when he was recording with Cocteau Twins in the 80s. How did they do it? What happened? They went into the studio to record something. And he said to me, well, we just went into the studio and just started recording. I said, we didn't have any songs planned. We didn't go in with a song worked out. We just went to see what happens. And, if I'd already worked it out, where would the fun be in that? That is what I've kind of been doing here, which is, I guess, improvising and recording everything and grabbing the bits that work and then developing them. So as he would have done 30 years ago, I would set up a rhythm track and pick up an instrument, normally a guitar, and just start mucking about until you find a set of chords and you think, or an effect pedal, or something, the sound, you think, that's it. Now, right, let's record. Let's see what happens. And that kind of always seems to work out into a finished song. Once you've got to that little point that you think, yeah, there we are. That's what I'm going to follow that, and I'll follow it through to the end. And sometimes you're thinking, I'm not sure, but you work at it. You bring in other instruments. The only time that it wasn't working, there's a song on the first album, which is called Giron Dub, which is a kind of shoegaze reggae song. Now, earlier on, I was talking about the song that I did with Mary Wire on that album. And I was also talking to my friends in Unreal, Gary Perez. And I sent it to him at the same time as I'd sent it to Mary. And she came back and said, yeah, I really want to do it. And he came back and said, we really want to do it. And I thought, oh, well, Mary's already said that. So I said, look, I'll see if I can write another one.
Yeah.
And send it to you. Anyway, so the next day I kind of sat down and I was kind of playing the guitar and I got this rhythm track going. And I was really trying to do something for a purpose. And it just wasn't working. And I didn't have that inspiration because I was concentrating and thinking, well, this has got to be the kind of song that they would be able to do something with. I thought, for 2 hours, I'm banging my head against the wall. So I thought, well, I'll slow it down and I'll swap instruments. So I slowed it down quite a bit, picked the bass up and thought, oh, you know what this is? This is a dub reggae song trying to come out today. They're not going to be able to do anything with it, but that's where I'm going today. That is the point. Suddenly there's that flash of, there it is.
Yes.
And I'm going to take that and with the bass, and I'm going to work on that and see where that takes me. And I spent the rest of the day, and by the end of that day, the 99% of the song was done. Ironically, a few months later, I was offering various friends of mine the opportunity, if they wished, to remix any of the songs. And Gardy picked out that song, not knowing that I had written it for them originally, and it turned into something else. And he did a fantastic ambient remix of that, which is the last track on the kind of the remixes album that I did later that year. So yeah, so you're finding that moment where it all just kind of works.
Yeah.
And then you see where it takes you. You follow it through.
Okay, so let's follow this thread a little bit and let's move into this gorgeous, sparkling album called Fade that was just released this year. I love it. 8 songs, over 40 minutes long. Each song is very contemplative. For me, it's very meditative. There's textures in here going on that you may not catch the first time. And I call this, as I've said with some other artists, which is a great compliment, it's kind of that setting with headphones. If you get in that space, you're going to be rewarded handsomely. So with this album Fade, you alluded to this earlier. What was the trajectory that you were going on? What were you searching for in the spirit of this album?
As I said to you earlier, it started off just making some recordings, and then it became something of a kind of release for all sorts of emotions and that I was going through at the time. And really just, it was something to do with my time that made me not have to think about the kind of dark thoughts that were floating around me during December and January, except that those were then coming out into the music. That there's, I had musical ideas that I wanted to pursue, but they kind of got a lot darker than I had anticipated, particularly on what became the first side. So, as I said before, I kind of felt by this stage that I'm getting the hang of the playing and the recording and the sound, and I'm able to kind of express thoughts and feelings in the music in a way that perhaps in the earlier recordings I was struggling to do so.
Okay.
But then I had things I needed to say, and I wanted to say them, but I didn't want. I'm happy to be in a kind of shoegaze setting where the lyrics can be difficult to understand because they're low in the mix, because you kind of want to have it out there, but you don't want everybody to hear too clearly quite what you're going through. And some of the tracks that I've left as instrumentals, there's the second song, which I called Catacombs, but was originally had the working title Dead Man Walking. And it's a kind of shoegaze blues thing. And it was just, again, it just kind of came out. I didn't give it too much thought. It was just, I was messing around with a synth preset, and that kind of led to a chord sequence. And then I kind of looped it and then just played. And it got something out of me that was kind of needed to be exorcised.
Yeah. I'm hearing that in your voice, and I'm sure with these 8 tracks, these are your little babies, right? And
Yeah.
I do want to ask you this question before we take a listen to a couple of songs. Is there a song on this album that was a pain in the ass? It just was not coming to you, for whatever reason, and then finally, boom, the skies opened up and you nailed it.
Yeah, it's the title song.
Oh.
It started out as a piano ballad. When you're recording this thing, you think, I've got to save it, and I don't have any words, and I don't know what I'm going to sing about, and I don't know what it's about at all yet. So I kind of got called Soppy Love Song because I didn't know what I was doing. But it started off, and I thought, this is really not very good. And then I started to lay down the guitar tracks, and suddenly it took on a whole different life. And over the course of a couple of days, I gradually removed that original piano thing altogether and followed where the music seemed to be leading, and ended up thinking, oh my, I remember my wife, I had not written the lyrics, but I was so moved by the music at one point that, I was kind of looking out the window with tears in my eyes and thinking, oh shit, what have I done here? Because this is not what I had originally imagined from this song, but this is saying something to me in a way that I've not really done before. And then I sat down and wrote the lyrics, and I thought, how am I ever going to sing these? And I sang the chorus one day, and then I sang the verses another day, and then I sang the sort of middle 8 section the third day, and then I had to go back. You'll hear in the opening verse, there's a catch in my throat, and I left that in because, I was struggling to sing that song. I was struggling with those lyrics at the time, but I wanted that to be heard, I could have re-recorded that, and I chose not to. What I did do, and this is refer to my friend Mr. Guthrie. His great advice to me was go back, take some space at the end of the recording, go back and listen again, and you'll hear it with fresh ears. And I had gone off and done some other music after I'd finished the album.
Yeah.
And then I went and spent another week. It's the week that he didn't get to spend finishing Cocteau Twins' third album, Treasure, which he always regrets and which he feels means that for him that album is unfinished. And I thought, you know what? Maybe this album is unfinished. And I went back to that song, recorded the intro and the outro afresh, and added some other bits in the middle. And at a time when I had discovered that what had driven the song in the first place was no longer an issue for me. And I don't think that it would have been the same song if it hadn't been for first of all, what drove it to start with, which was a medical diagnosis, misdiagnosis, which I spoke about earlier. And then to go back and complete it after I kind of got the all clear.
Okay. Thank you again for sharing all these little tidbits, nuggets of information. We're going to listen to the track Fade. Here we go. Andrew, one of the reasons why I picked this song is because, and now that I know the backstory to this song, it even brings out the muscle. It flexes it even more. This song is so breathtaking. And I'm going to put it up there with one of my favorite bands, Kitchens of Distinction, Slow Dive, Spiritualized, Moon Cowboy. It's got all these phenomenal elements going on. It's breathtaking. It's moving. It transcends the listener into that space that perhaps you and Robin have been talking about. And it's a very emotional, gripping tune where when I first heard it, I thought, oh my goodness, if I ever see this in a live setting, I think I would kind of lose my shit.
I'm not sure I could do it. But I would.
It's haunting. And it is a track that I feel that it's one of those journey tracks. So thank you for making such a wonderful song there. All righty. We're going to do another song.
Okay.
And I'd like for the listeners to take a listen to actually the very last track. This is called Open My Eyes. Let's take a listen and then you can fill in the details. Here we go. Open My Eyes. All right, Andrew, give us some backstory to that one.
Oh, now this is quite a fun one because this is where I took two songs that I wrote lyrics for in about 93, 94, when I was kind of running out of steam. And if you listen to the lyric, the chorus and the verse are totally opposite to each other. So the verse is a kind of love song to my probably future wife at the time, but near wife, which I never quite turned into music. And then the chorus is like a kind of, not sure, kind of splitting up kind of thing. But I kind of wanted to knit the two together and see what would happen, having done the song. And at that point, I was thinking that Fade would be the ideal outro for the album. And I can't really recall how this one kind of jumped into life. But once I got started, I thought, that kind of Chameleons-esque chiming guitar that's going on. There's a kind of guitar. So I have a preset set of effects that I call my Pale Saints guitar sound, which I use as for solos. And that was kind of, I mean, compared to the story behind Fade, there's no great story behind it, but it just, I wanted to do something a little bit epic. I think I needed something at the end of the album as a real closer. And again, I referred to going back at the urging of Robin Guthrie, going back to the song. I played this on my DKFM show as an unfinished track back in January.
Mm-hmm.
And what I went back and did was stick that solo on at the end, which finally I nailed the sound that I heard Slowdive playing Golden Hair at Paris in 2014. That kind of soaring, epic lead guitar kind of screaming over and just kind of taking everything. I thought, you know what, that's the fucking brilliant way to finish an album. It just played. I don't like to kind of blow my own trumpet, but it blows me away when I hear it. And that wasn't going to be there. But again, that was a thanks, Robin Guthrie, for that guitar solo, because I wouldn't have played it without you. And it's and other bits of rearranging that I did in that song. But I just wanted to do a big, epic album closer, and there it was.
And absolutely right. To me, it's like the Ben-Hur of closing of the albums, and it's on that biblical proportion. It has that Churchill Garden, Andy Josie feel to it.
Yep, he's a big influence. He's a big influence.
Octo Twins and amalgamate. Yep. You stir that pot around, and then you mean your own voice, your own experiences, and their sonic textures. And that's why I picked this song for the listener. Yeah. And I
like the fact that it does bring together the music that I'm doing now and the stuff that I was thinking about 30 years ago. And it's like a kind of life story in a song, really. Yeah. As a result, in a musical context.
All wrapped up in a blanket of 7 minutes.
Yeah, somebody did say it's a bit long.
It's not long enough. So there.
It is a bit long, isn't it?
It is not long enough. All right. With regards to your work as a musician, where are you trying to get better in terms of your craft? What aspect of being a musician that you're really trying to hone in on?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I don't really kind of think of it in that way. It's a constant exploration, and I just want to be. It's more of a case of wanting to carry on being creative than perfect anything particularly, or hone in on everything. As I alluded to before, working with instruments that I'm not totally adept at forces creativity, and what I'm looking for is to dig out that creativity that I know is and which I remember from being a sort of 15-year-old banging away at the piano and thinking, I wish there was a way I could capture this, because I'm doing something here and I'm spending half an hour just sort of playing away, total improvisation, thinking, God, if only I could remember some of this at a later date and turn it into a song. That kind of, there's something in there that, as long as it's in there, I want to be able to get it out. And I'm doing it for me, really. If anybody else likes it, well, that's nice. And it's been lovely to hear what you said about it, really, because, it's it's often just a personal journey, and it's a musical journey, and it really something that I just want to see where it goes. I'm curious.
And that open mindedness, which I greatly appreciate and value and respect, that journey, the unknown, the curiosity, I can see that being great fuel for your inspiration. And I'm going to read another little bit here from the book, Build the Life You Want, with regards to your work as a musician. And Andrew, feel free to respond however you like. Okay. So in this part of the book, Arthur C. Brooks is talking about when we work to strive for self-satisfaction and gratification, sometimes we can go overboard because we don't know how to shut off the valve. Here we go. Are you a self-objectifier in your job or career? If you answered affirmatively, recognize that you will never be satisfied as long as you objectify yourself. Your career or job should be an extension of you, not vice versa. 2 practices can help as you reassess your priorities. First, put some space between your job and your life. Maybe you have been in a healthy relationship or 2 in your life, but only recognize this when you had a break from it, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. Indeed, this human tendency probably contributes to the fact that most trial separations lead to divorce, especially they last more than a year. Space provides perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm happy to say that my relationship has been very good since the night I met my wife. So in that side of things, there's never been any kind of problems. As far as work is concerned, I've been very, very lucky in being able at the age of 35 to quit my job and move countries and do something that I love to do. And I love to go to work every day and do what I do. As far as being a creative musician, that's something that I guess was probably a frustrated desire for quite a long time before I got back to making music again myself.
Mhm.
But it's just something that I just really love doing it. You know, I just enjoy the whole process. I'm happy that
Yeah.
I don't have to sell it. I don't have to go out on the road. It doesn't matter ultimately to my livelihood, my well-being, if nobody in the world is pays the slightest bit of attention to what I'm doing. It's really great when people do like it, but I'm not doing it for monetary remuneration. And that's a really privileged place to be in. And I'm very, very lucky that I'm in a position to do what I do. And I have a record company because I have my other work, so I know how to do all of that side of the business. I'm not relying on record labels. I'm a totally self-contained act, I suppose. And that's a great freedom for anyone to have.
Sure. And I imagine you provide and allow the space in between your work where you're not getting so flooded with being bogged down and losing sight of the things that perhaps are a little bit more meaningful in your life.
Sure. Yeah. And I recognize that there's a time of year which is conducive to recording. And it's when it's cold and dark and wet and there's nothing to do outside. We live in a part of France where we get a lot of visitors during the summer, and you're out all the time, you're outdoors, you're meeting people, you're having a great social life. That's really not a time to be trying to sit in your room and spend a day recording. But I kind of feel you get to December, you think it's probably time to start work on another album. and that's what I've done. And then actually start thinking about, well, we could go and shoot some video when the weather gets better. It gives you a kind of timetable, I suppose, but also something to do in those cold, dark winter months when it's quiet at home and and get the creative juices flowing again.
I love that. And that connects me to James Hackett, the lead singer of the Orchids. And I said to him in an interview, I said, James, how is it that Scottish people know how to write these amazing, romantic, melancholic songs? And he goes, W, it rains all the time in Scotland. And I said, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Andrew.
We've had a lot of rain this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we wrap this up, we're going to have a little bit of fun here.
Okay.
And the first part of this is, would you care to share 1, 2, 3 albums for the listener? Any recommendations?
I will go back to 3 albums which hugely changed me as a teenager. Okay. First one, Cocteau Twins, Head Over Heels. I first started listening to John Peel's radio show, which went out from 10 till midnight. So I'm supposed to be going to bed. I was about 14, 15. And he was playing that album incessantly. And I thought, what is this? It's like you kind of come away from being a kid and listening to Blondie and OMD and Japan and all that. And suddenly there's this kind of, whoa. I thought, well, he thinks this is important, so I'm going to listen to it. And a friend of mine, his older brother, had it, so he made a tape for me, a cassette. And I listened to it. And there was one day when I had it on my little Walkman, and I was listening to the very last song, Musette and Drums, and I heard that solo at the end, and I thought, fuck me, this is just unbelievable. And that was the first time something like that had that kind of, just the pure music of it that blew me away then. Jump forward 2 years and Jesus and Mary Chain. And there was huge press around them. And this was kind of this noise, but they had the melodies. And I bought their first 3 or 4 singles, and then I got their first album, Psycho Candy. And that was an epiphany again. It was the kind of the Scottish melody, the beautiful melodies, the vocal melodies that they had, coupled with noise.
Yes.
And that album, for me, is by far the best they ever did. I saw them on the Darklands tour a couple of years later, and they'd already stopped all that kind of feedback stuff and calmed things down a bit. But that first album, songs, oh golly, this is where my brain doesn't work so well. The names of some, You Trip Me Up. I mean, that is just genius, absolute genius in 2.5 minutes. The other album that I would say, which I actually came to slightly late, a few years after it had been released, but I was already into the band, was Chameleons. Their first album, Script to the Bridge, which has some awesome. And you listen to my stuff, and you'll hear Robin Guthrie, you'll hear Jesus and Mary Chain, perhaps, particularly on some of the stuff that is not yet been released, and you will hear those chiming Chameleons guitars. And that last song on Script to the Bridge, View from a Hill.
Oh.
I in 1989, sitting on a hill out on the edge of the Glastonbury Festival with a friend of mine, listening to it on a little cassette recorder, and saying to him, Ian, when I die, this is what I want to go out to. And I have not changed my mind in the last however many years that is. There's just something so magical about that record, and particularly that last song. And it's been such a fabulous thing to be able to meet Mark Burgess, half Chameleons, came and spent my 50th birthday weekend here in France. We played that song together on my 50th birthday in my living room. I played the bass line, he played the guitar, and he sang it. And it's such a privilege to be able to do that. It's been such an amazing musical journey, and these songs that mean so much to you for so long, those are the 3 albums. that I would say you've got to listen to, because that's where it all starts. That's where shoegaze and the whole shoegaze and dream pop thing begins. You've got Robin Guthrie on Head Over Heels, you've got Jesus and Mary Chain with The Noise, and you've got that kind of ethereal, chiming echo guitars that the Chameleons were using. Put that together and add a dose of Neil Halstead, and you've got Slowline with a bit of My Bloody Valentine.
Oh my goodness. Nobody can see this, but you can only hear it. But just hearing that story, I got goosebumps. I'm getting a little misty because the vehement expression in you telling that story, and I can picture you and Mark, feel myself falling to the ground, solitary silence, there's no sound, open my eyes and look around. A big influence on me as a listener. And thank you for sharing those 3 albums. And I know you have so many more. We could go on and on. Maybe we'll just do our own podcast show on that. Okay, so Andrew, we're going to do a full stop on this conversation, as they say in England.
Right.
This is called lightning round.
Right.
And I'm going to just throw out some words, and I just want you to share with the listener things that come to mind. Okay? No right or wrong. Here we go. DKF.
DKFM, my favorite radio station. I am honored and privileged to have a monthly little show, but it's a lifeline.
Favorite swear word at this moment?
Oh, fuck.
Great. Coffee or tea?
Depends on the time of day. I make
Beer.
an espresso. I drink an espresso every morning while I'm making the tea.
Love it.
True.
Beer or wine?
Oh, I live in wine country. This is a wine from my village. This is a rosé from my friend I went to see this afternoon in his little chateau up the road. His brother has a microbrewery. He's also the village mayor. Cheers.
Steven Spielberg or Stanley Kubrick?
If I was good at quotes, I would quote from The Shining. Here's Johnny.
Victoria Land.
Has manifested itself on several of my songs.
One of your favorite restaurants?
I'm going to go back to when I was 19, 20, 21, a student in London. There was a guy who was only a couple of years older than me, Bangladeshi guy, had an Indian restaurant called the Deedar Tandoori. Closed years ago. I used to go there and we became really good friends. He was in love with the girl next door, the butcher's daughter. And he decided that he wanted to write a song for her. And he came round to my student flat one night after the restaurant shut, and we sat up until 3 a.m. and wrote a song. And I went into university the next day and recorded this song and came back with it on a cassette and gave it to him and said, here you are, here's a song. And he said, Andrew, you'll never pay for another meal in your life in this restaurant. Come into the kitchen, I'll show you how it's all done. There began my love of cooking, and particularly Indian cooking. There you are. Deedar Tandoori, 1987 to 1991.
One of your favorite concert experiences? And I know you have so many.
Well, I've already spoken about Even As We Speak, and I would say the other one has to be the first time I saw the Reformed Slow Dive in Paris. I had managed to talk my way into their dressing room that afternoon and reintroduce myself to the band. I'd kind of vaguely arranged to see Rachel, but I kind of bigged it up a bit. So I ended up talking to them. I ended up talking to Simon Scott for quite a long time that afternoon. And then I brought knocked a little tape recorder in with me, a digital recorder. So I was standing there with my recorder like this, trying to record this, thinking this might be the only time I ever hear them again. And I'm standing there, and they're playing Catch the Breeze,
Yeah.
and I can't move, and the tears are rolling down my face. And at the end of it, I kind of think, everybody's clapping, and I can just kind of do that. And I look, there's a guy I'm 6 foot tall. There's a guy next to me. He's up here somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, very big fella, who's exactly the same as me, absolutely bawling his eyes out. That, coupled with the golden hair at the end of that, and that recording, I mean, that whole experience was amazing. And I met up with them at the end of the gig, and we walked back to our respective hotels together. And that kind of cemented a link between them, and particularly with Christian, as it turned out. But that whole gig was just mind-blowing. They were just so fabulous. And it was just, after so many years, so the music had meant so much to me for so long.
Yeah.
And to hear it again, and to hear it done so well, and
Yes.
to hear those twin guitars, Christian and Neil playing Golden Hair at the end, and just the kind of sound of that rolling over this venue in North Paris. Oh, again, tears again. Nothing like it before or since.
Okay, we got one more for you. Are you ready?
Yep.
3 words. Kitchens of distinction.
Wow. I saw them once in New Cross in London in about probably 93. And I was astonished that there were only 3 of them, because I didn't really know. I had a couple of their albums and loved it. And to hear what one guy could do with a guitar, it was just fantastic. Yeah, love them. Absolutely love them. I always have them. I'm also delighted that they did a cover version of there's a song called White Horses.
Yes.
That ended up which was, as a kid, and I'm sure the same for them. We grew up in England with this black and white TV show from what was then Yugoslavia, about this young girl and her horses. And it just had this song, the theme song, that had stuck in my head for years, and I couldn't quite remember it. And then I found they covered it, and I thought, oh, wow, that's how it goes. But this had stuck in my mind since about 1974. Yeah, great. Kitchens of distinction.
It's a brilliant word. And Trash Can Sinatra's also did a wonderful cover of that as well.
Wow, I'll have to look that up.
Andrew Rose, what is coming down the line for you in 2024?
Okay, well, after the album was finished, I was kind of still going, and I recorded. It was quite a nice space here. I recorded a set of instrumentals which came out, but there was a few things that I'd been kind of messing about with on the album, which I wanted to take a bit further. One of them turned into a single that I released on the 29th of February, deliberately, because it was all about not being able to keep time and using different time sequences, signatures and stuff. But I carried on and I wrote another 4 songs. So there's an EP, which kind of speeds things up for 3 of the 4 songs. I wanted to do something a bit more up-tempo, the kind of stuff I was hearing at gigs, whereas my stuff had been generally quite a bit slower. I'm up-tempo, and I'm playing around with ideas and doing rhythmic things and chopping stuff up and using multiple rhythm stuff and playing around with that. And then a song at the end, which is very much a kind of traditional Calier song, which actually I will be going to Lisbon in Portugal in a couple of months' time to shoot some video for, because the song is called Lisbon, and the Lisbon EP is currently scheduled for July.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Been a pleasure.
Andrew Rose, this has been a pleasure. I'm so glad we have connected in person, face to face, microphone to microphone. I love the inspiration behind your music. I love the experience that you bring to the conversation. Your personality is vivacious. It's passionate. It is something you are connected to your emotions and your feelings and to the way that you express your art and your work as a musician is fabulous. And I wish you nothing but the greatest success. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Now, this time, Andrew, I'm going to read something to you, and I don't want you to respond. I just want you to listen. This again is from The Creative Act, A Way of Being, written by Rick Rubin. He's talking about greatness. Imagine going to live on a mountaintop by yourself forever. You build a home that no one will ever visit. Still, you invest the time and effort to shape the space in which you will spend your days. The wood, the plates, the pillows, all magnificent, curated to your taste. This is the essence of great art. We make it for no other purpose than creating our version of the beautiful, bringing all of ourselves to every project, whatever parameters and constraints. Consider it an offering, a devotional act. We do the best as we see the best with our own taste, no one else's. Thank you so much for tuning in to this really intimate, intelligent conversation with Andrew Rose. Check out his work. Head on over to Bandcamp. All goodies there, Spotify. My name is William, also known as W, host of the High Art on the Edge page and Surprise Cast. Take care, everyone. And remember, great music is always out there. You just have to keep your ears open.